Harrison and Christy chilling in the Paramount studio with the lovely Grace Potter.
Hey!
Thank you for joining us today, not just here in the studio, but also for bursting onto the music scene because, Grace, there's not a lot of rock stars these days, and I don't just mean the genre of rock, I mean like superstars. And you got that rock star quality, Grace.
Well,
you got
guys,
that.
Listen, right back at you. I'm sorry, I'm not wearing a full suit as you are. You look very dapper today. You guys came in, we had an amazing soundcheck party, but it's a pleasure to be in company of fellow rock stars. Let's put it that way.
Oh, that's very sweet. But you got the vibe. I mean, your voice is so passionate. You got that sexy, confident swagger. You're kind of like Mick Jagger and Janis Joplin, bitch slap Whitney Houston. That's the kind of vibe you got.
Oh man, I'll take it. Thank you. That's great.
So the album Midnight is very pop. It's your solo album. It's very different from the blues rock or the psychedelic disco rock of the Nocturnals. Were you trying to express a different side of yourself musically?
Yeah, I think I was. I didn't mean to, though. You know, it's funny, when you set out to write a record, I always pictured, you know, when I saw musicians out there in the world, I'm like, there must be like a board of people that sit around in a room, you know, and plan the career of any artist. And it turns out that artists are very fickle, crazy animals ourselves. So we don't actually, even if there are a boardroom full of people trying to plan our career, and say, okay, well, we're going to go for this radio hit, or this is the sound that you're going to go for, or this is the style or demographic that's going to fit for you. We usually, if you're a true artist, you tend to go in the exact opposite direction.
Right.
So I've had a lot of fun experimenting, and when I started writing the record, I just wanted to make more rock and roll, you know.
Right.
But essentially, the muse, as a songwriter, I follow my muse, and wherever it takes me, it goes there. And I was listening to a lot of Talking Heads, a lot of the Eurythmics, a lot of, you know, actually Whitney Houston, oddly. You mentioned Whitney Houston, Madonna, Michael Jackson, you know, a lot of the Quincy Jones productions and the Phil Spector stuff from the early 60s. And, like, you know, there's a lot of time that passed when pop music was one thing, and then it changed suddenly. Yeah,
and you hear that on Midnight. It's your first solo album since, what, 2004?
Yeah.
And you did something with T-Bone Burnett, right, in
did.
2009? Is that going to sit on the shelves, or is that ever going to come out?
You know, we've been talking about it a little bit. I don't know what's going to happen with that record, but it's really cool. I heard it for the first time in over 6 years, about a week ago. I was sitting there listening to it, being like, we got to do something with this.
Did you have a different take on it because it's been 6 years?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I sound very young, but it sounds very T-Bone, and T-Bone is an amazing producer, and you know that he's going to make timeless music. So the good news is, no matter when we put it out, it's going to sound like it came from the T-Bone era. Right. You know, it's not really about me, and I think that's really powerful to hear a voice being put to someone else's aesthetic. But this album definitely wasn't that. This was definitely my aesthetic and me finding my voice, you know, individually.
And you're inspired by people who've never settled musically, like
Bowie.
David Bowie.
Yeah, exactly.
Never settling for one thing. So Midnight is kind of a natural progression for you.
Yeah. I also think I just wanted to put that sound out there for everybody, by the way. That's the sound of...
It's very rock and roll.
Dean Martin and David Bowie are my biggest influences. No, I do. I feel like there's a lot of music that the most compelling thing about it is that it shouldn't happen. Yeah. You know, and a lot of the Bowie records I love are the ones where, like, why did he do that? Yeah. You know, that's when the conversations get started. So this record wasn't really about proving anything. It was more about having the conversation, or just at least trying to engage my voice in a different context.
Absolutely.
So a lot of your songs tend to be based on your own personal experiences, especially Stars, which you just did amazing in soundtrack. You killed it.
Thank you.
But does that ever get any easier to perform?
It's always emotional. It's so intense. I also think that singers have this weird wall they have to put up where they don't get emotional. And I've seen a lot of performers do it well. I've seen some break down, and I'm one of them. I've broken down on stage a couple times. But I do think if you know how to sing properly, you should be able to sing through it. Unfortunately, I'm one of the ones who can't, so I'm just like,
I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I think that's good, showing your emotion.
Well, it's humanity. Yeah. You know, I think that at this point, people have seen what real is, and they've seen every version of processed. I mean, any computer can make anyone sound amazing. You know what I mean? So we know what pop stars sound like when it's coming from a real place. I'm not a pop star, you know what I mean? Right. Even if this is a slightly more poppy record, I'm never going to be Taylor Swift or Katy Perry. There's a reason for that. It's because I shouldn't be. They are already doing that. And maybe those walls that I'm I get a little bit broken or I get a little rusty here or there. And I think maybe that's a good thing for people to hear, because they'll hear that humanity in it, you know, and hopefully be able to relate to it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think you can feel like your passion through it.
Yeah. And by the way, Katie Swift, those girls are very good.
Yeah.
And I think that I don't want to, you know, dog on them, because I totally tried to go to the Taylor Swift concert in Miami last week and I couldn't get tickets.
Aw.
So is it different writing music outside of the group? Because when you're, you know, trying to incorporate everyone's ideas,
Right.
It's a little different than just being on your own, because solo, you're kind of naked. Please tell me you recorded some of the music while you were naked.
I actually did. Did you know that?
Yeah,
Had you read that somewhere?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I'm trying to feed you.
I haven't told too many people that. Sorry, I'm sick and I got the whole band sick. I feel really bad. But we sound great on stage.
You
did sound great.
That's what the those fancy compressors are for. I did. As I was writing the album, I always write all the music, and even with the Nocturnals, I've always written it. But I usually bring in what I call the scaffolding, and then the band will fill it in with, you know, really cool designs and some, you know, whether it's drywall one day or, you know, some kind of cool foam filler another day. Every single member of the band contributes something, for sure.
Right.
Although creatively, I think I've always built the infrastructure of it. So I didn't think it was very different, you know, initially. It didn't feel much different than any other process I've ever been through. And it was only really when the record was almost completely done that the band knew, and I eventually kind of accepted that it really wasn't a Nocturnals record, and it would be kind of shortchanging the fans to say it was, you know, or at least it would be taking and diluting the legacy that I built with the Nocturnals, because I'm really proud of it, and it's one sound, and it's something that roots rock sound, that kind of whiskey drenched tumbleweed rock and roll, is something that I will never regret or wish I hadn't done. It's just it's only one part of my personality.
Sure.
You know.
You said that sex is your biggest influence.
Yes, it is.
Strippers were brought into the recording studio for one of the Nocturnals albums. So
yes. The Paris Ooh La La song is actually the one that they were in there for.
Really?
That explains a lot.
Yeah, no, it totally does. So Madonna, Bowie, the Stones, are you influenced by them because of the sex appeal that they bring to their performance?
Yeah, I think that's the thing about a front person, is that it's not even sex appeal as in boys liking girls or girls liking boys. It's actually this kind of wild, like when Robert Plant and Mick Jagger were starting to get into fashion. I don't know if you noticed this, but in the song Remains the Same, Robert Plant is definitely wearing a woman's blouse.
Yeah,
like
it's
definitely, and I think that that sexuality and that presence of sexuality in music has been there forever, and the blues guys knew it, and Elvis picked it up with his hips shaking moves in the 50s, and it's been carrying out in a different way ever since. But any great front person should exude, or at least acknowledge, that presence in their music, because I think it is one of the most basic human instincts. I mean, what else are we here on earth to do? I think we're pretty much here to procreate.
Yeah, good point. You collaborated with a lot of people. Kenny Chesney, a couple country songs. You poked your head in the room with Government Mule. You did Give Me Shelter with the Stones this summer in Austin. What was your favorite collaboration so far?
I mean, I hate to pick, because every experience is its own milestone. But I did have the great pleasure of singing The Weight with Mavis Staples.
Wow.
And Roger Waters, and Joe Walsh, Ray LaMontagne, John Mayer was there, Lucinda Williams was there, My Morning Jacket was there. It was a tribute to Levon Helm. Okay. And the members of the band were there as well. And that moment, though, with Mavis was a big one for me, because she's always been someone who I feel really walked the line beautifully between musicality and her beliefs, you know, and being powerful and empowering other people. But I kind of think that if I had to pick one, probably singing Give Me Shelter with Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, Ronnie Wood, and Charlie Watts on stage has to take the cake.
Absolutely.
You know, it's definitely a bucket list moment.
Getting into bucket list moments, all those shows like American Idol and The Voice, these people have one song to kind of get themselves in to hopefully get to perform. And a lot of people always pick your songs. How does that feel?
It's weird. It's so weird, because I'm like, I didn't ever get into that show. I actually, when I'm writing those songs, I think the reason that they work is because I'm a vocalist. And so when I write a song, I'm always writing it from a place of, I should be able to sing this with no music behind it, and it should still be powerful. I don't want to rely on production or fancy compressors or even guitars or piano. I want to be able to know that when I'm performing that song, it's going to be compelling by itself. So in the audition process, as you know, on American Idol and The Voice, they really are just listening for your voice. So hopefully, I think maybe it's a sign that I can write a good song for an a cappella
Definitely.
singer,
Definitely is. And also, when you're performing up on stage, I know you don't really see, you don't like to look and see faces, and you feel
I'm
your
legally
audience.
blind, by the way. That's why. I can't see anything.
Right. But, so how, what is it like to feel the audience? Can you just kind of describe?
Yeah. Well, this is a good example. Today, even at the soundcheck party, even though there was only about 10 people in the room, everyone's bringing in their own intention, right? So anybody who comes to a concert, you come to rock music or a hip-hop show or a rave or a dance club because you need it, right? There's something about it that it's drawn you there. So I take and I feel everyone's story, whether I can hear all the specifics or if I know exactly what they're doing there. I just know that music is a compelling and powerful healer. And whether someone's there because they're hurting and they need to heal, or because they wanted to bring someone else, because out of the generosity of their heart, they're like, you're gonna love this, it's gonna make you feel better. Everyone needs those pick-me-ups. So I feel that energy instead of looking at individual faces and going, okay, she totally brought her boyfriend here. He doesn't want to be here. He's got to go. Like the bachelorette party over there that's being loud. Whatever it is, I think it's easier and actually more powerful to feel the collective energy instead of picking people out. Because the second you start picking people out in the audience, it creates this sort of hierarchy of you're closer to the stage, you're farther away. Whereas I want to make everybody feel like we're all sitting in a living room having a conversation.
Right.
That's awesome.
Like you, I grew up in New England, always felt like I was in the middle of nowhere.
Yes.
Do you think that isolation or that separation from a big music scene like LA, New York, or Boston kind of helped fuel your sound or your drive?
Yeah, oh, for sure. That isolation is part of what makes people creative. Mm-hmm. And I mean, Bob Dylan was from a very remote area. Right. I think anybody who's spent time in the sticks, as we call them, knows that our lives are built around the excitement of one day in a week, maybe. Mm-hmm. Maybe. Like, there's one big thing that happens. Like, did you hear they delivered fish? There's fish. We got crawfish. We got a whole salmon. That, my friend actually is a salmon fisher, and it's like a big deal. When he shows up with the salmon from Alaska, it's like, oh my God. So I actually really think that it's those small moments in life that make you, as an artist, they make you really want to capture them in a 3-minute song.
Yeah.
Tell your story from that place.
When you go back there to clear your head, New England, what is it about
Sure.
Vermont that's kind of like rehab for you?
Well, people are just so honest.
Yeah.
They're not going to take any of my business. They don't, you know what I mean? There's none of this like rock star. People do not, there's no limos. I don't think there's any limos in Vermont. But I don't, the rock star treatment is something I've never looked for. I'm not a princess, and I don't want to be treated like one. I like doing things myself. I like to get my hands dirty. So usually when I get home, the first thing that happens is it's some kind of a project, whether it's a demolition project or I'm digging up the garden or I'm parking cars or chopping wood. It's just a way to re-level and get back to being a human. Mm-hmm. Remember that we all are humans and we're just trying to survive. And my job is to bring that little sparkle of happiness and inspiration to somebody if they need it. But that's not my job when I'm home.
Right.
I just gotta get the firewood into the stove, keep the house warm.
Keep it simple. Right.
That's right.
You definitely bring a lot of that sparkle. I know you dormed with some men and women who were in the service
Yes.
for a while. I mean, that's amazing that you would take the time to go and do that and support them, because they do so much for us. So what was that like?
That was amazing. I went and flew over to the Air Force Base in Qatar. I've been told it's pronounced Qatar and Qatar. I'm not sure, but Al Udeid is the name of the Air Force Base that we visited with Michelle Obama and Conan O'Brien. And Conan's the one who invited me. And at the time, I was just psyched because I had played Conan and I was like, let's do something together. Let's come up with something cool. And he's like, I've got something cool. And, this experience was really about bringing music to the military folks over there who've given their lives and talk about a slice of life, and really not taking anything for granted. We got brought into the dorm rooms and we saw how they lived, and it's not like, this is a third world country this is a very, very rich country, but there was a lot of amazing folks devoting their lives to it and living very minimally. I mean, there was no TVs. It wasn't like this, you get the internet and everybody's on Instagram. It was a really phenomenal perspective. Although there were some Facebook posts, and I just 2 days ago had a meet and greet with a woman who was in Qatar on a mission, an Air Force mission that day. She's my biggest fan, she says, and she was like, I couldn't believe it. No one said you were going to be there. I knew that the First Lady and Conan were going to be there. So we ended up doing a meet and greet with her after all, as she did here on Facebook. So they it's not completely out of touch, but it is a very humbling experience.